I'm good. How about you? Thanks. As far as you know.
Yeah, I'm still, I got up this morning.
That's why I like to start every day.
I hear you. You gonna move some with you?
No, JD's supposed to do it. Yeah.
like to welcome everyone here to the services of the Benton Church. Good to see everybody. Had a beautiful day. It's been a really, really nice day. It's going to get colder, they say, so we're not used to that this winter. Always seems to happen in March after we have nice weather. Just a few things we need to announce tonight. Jenna Pogue has been moved to the Calvary City Convalescent Center. She's in room 209. Roger Jarrett was transferring to Brookdale with Pat for the remainder of his rehab. Cindy Edwards, the daughter of Larry and Flo Spears and sister to Susie Tynes, has been diagnosed with cancer of the appendix. Her address is on the foyer bulletin board. Need to remember that family, especially Larry and Flo, during this difficult time, and the whole family. Bill Lyles had shoulder surgery Monday. He's back home and resting. And Teresa Anderson, the mother of Hillary Powell, came forward Sunday night, as we know, asking for prayers for the church. And certainly that was good to see. Let's remember Teresa in our daily prayers. Of course, our sympathies expressed to the family of Bob Pogue, who passed away Saturday, and the funeral was yesterday. Our sympathies expressed to John Henson in the passing of his uncle Scotty Henson, and the funeral was this past weekend. And our sympathy is expressed to the Bob York family in the passing of his cousin-in-law, Betty York. Her arrangements will be at Collier Funeral Home. Visitation will be Thursday from 5 to 8. Funeral service will be held at 2 p.m. on Friday. Other announcements that we have, our Father-Daughter Day is Friday, March the 17th at 6 p.m. If you're interested, please see Travis by this Sunday to let him know the picture that you would like to paint. And the West Kentucky Leadership Workshop at the Bryansburg Church of Christ. The theme this year is Rebuilding the Walls, Leadership Principles from the Book of Nehemiah. It'll be March the 18th. And there's a flyer in the foyer bulletin board with more information. Attention girls 11 to 18 years old. Campbell Church of Christ want you to plant your roots deep as they host their first Growing in Righteousness, Love, and Sisterhood Girls Retreat, April 7th through the 9th. That's at the Campbell Church of Christ. It's called They Want You to Plant Your Roots Deep as they host their first Growing in Righteousness, Love, and Sisterhood Girls Retreat, April the 7th through the 9th. It will be held at WKYC, and the cost will be $40. Again, please check the foyer bulletin board for more information or email girlsretreat.wkyc@gmail.com and search for them on Facebook. Our Easter egg hunt will be Saturday, April the 15th. There will be a box placed in the foyer on Wednesday for anyone who would like to donate candy and plastic eggs. We also invite our after-school and Kids First program to join us, so any help is appreciated. If you have any questions, please see Luke or Aaron for this event. This Sunday, there will be a table set up in the foyer for a diaper shower in honor of Tasha Lyles and baby, is that Liam or Liam? How do you pronounce that? Liam? Liam, okay. Have I missed anything? We have any other announcements that need to be made at this time? Yes, Sonny. Yeah, I think you all heard that. Daylight savings time will be this weekend. It always creeps up on us, especially now, but remember that for the Sunday morning services. If we have no other announcements, let's bow in a word of prayer before Mike leads us. Father in heaven, we thank you for this beautiful day that we've had, and we thank you for this gathering that we have tonight. We pray, Father, that you will be with those who are sick and have various illnesses and ailments in hospitals. Some are in hospitals, some are at home. Please be with them and comfort them, give them the strength, and we would ask that you would heal them and be with their family members. Please be with us as we meditate tonight on your word. Help us to let it sink into our hearts and our lives, and help us to be the best examples of Christians that we can be every day so that we can influence other people. Please forgive us when we fail you, Lord, and these things we ask in Christ's name. Amen.
Number 859, When All of God's Singers Get Home. Or you'll have that up on there. Just a second. When all of God's singers get home. If you would, let's be standing together as we sing our song before devotional.
What a song of delight in that city so bright will be wafted neath heaven's fair dome. How the ransom will raise happy songs in his praise when all of God's singers get home. When all of God's singers get home. Whenever a sorrow will come, there'll be no place like home. When all of God's singers get home. As we sing here on earth, songs of sadness or mirth, 'tis a foretaste of rapture to come. But our joy can't compare with the glory up there when all of God's singers get home. When all of God's singers get home. Whenever a sorrow will come, there'll be no place like home. When all of God's singers get home. Having overcome sin, hallelujah, amen, will be heard in the land or the foe. Every heart will be light and each face will be bright when all of God's singers get home. When all of God's singers get home. Whenever a sorrow will come, there'll be no place like home. When all of God's singers get home.
Number 475, Glory to His Name will be our invitation song. If you would, you can be seated while Kevin brings the book.
Good evening. Glad to see everyone here tonight. You know, I don't do this often, so I always make myself some notes and some little bullet points in case I get lost, and I can glance down, kind of hopefully find where I was supposed to be and get going again. And those are very helpful if you bring them with you. We were just about to turn off 641 to come over to church, and I realized I'd left them at home. So we hurried home and made it back just in time. So it did take my mind off doing this, so I think it helped. But, you know, I don't get up here often to speak to everyone, and that's a good thing. But since I'm here tonight and I have approximately 30% of y'all's attention, I thought I would take this chance to kind of clear the air. There's something about me that maybe some of you have wondered about, some of you that have known me most all of my life probably felt pretty certain of, but almost 2 years ago, it was finally confirmed. And if you can put the picture up there, Lori. It was there and it left. There it is. I've got a screw loose. You can see in that circle, there's a screw that has broken and started backing out in my neck. And they took x-rays a few months later. It had backed out a little more. So, I kind of take it as it's a little bit of freedom. Now I just have an excuse. I've got a screw loose. So to confirm, you've all thought it, I know. So now it's been confirmed. All right, we can get that off of there. But I will circle back to that in a little bit later in the Devo. Tonight, my message is a simple one. It's one that's been on my heart and on my mind for a while, and thought I would take this opportunity to talk a little bit about it. But I've always been a firm believer in prayer, and I think prayer can do wonders, and it's a great thing that we have an avenue to God through Christ. And one of my favorite scriptures in regard to prayer is James 5:16, which says, "Confess your trespasses to one another and pray for one another that you may be healed. The effective, fervent prayer of a righteous man avails much." Now, that last sentence and a half or so is very meaningful to me. I've had situations in my life over the years where I was concerned about something going on, and I would call some of the men in our congregation that I felt were righteous men and ask them to pray for me. And that's always meant a lot to me. It's always helped me. There was one occasion where I called one of these men and asked them to pray for me, and they said, sure. He said, do you want to have a prayer now? And I said, well, yeah, that'd be great. So while I was going down the interstate doing 70-ish miles per hour, we had a prayer. And it meant a lot. It was a little different situation from when I normally have prayers, but I didn't close my eyes, in case you're wondering. Thought about it, but changed my mind. But still, it meant a lot to me, and it always has. I've always called on people in the past to pray for me when things are going on. When we study prayer, we typically talk about the avenue of prayer through Christ, or we talk about our prayer lives, and that's a great thing and a very important thing. But tonight I want to talk about it from a little bit of a different angle. A year ago, just over a year ago, on January 12th in 2016, I began what I'll call my adventure. I had to repair or to take care of this problem you saw on the screen earlier. I had a surgery. The surgery was successful, other than the fact that I developed a staph infection. Also developed pneumonia after the surgery while I was recovering. So it was made it a little more challenging. But over 3 more surgeries, over 3 months of IVs twice a day at home, and I could go on, but I won't bore you with that. But through all that, I gained a new perspective on prayer. My situation wasn't life-threatening. We've had people here that have been through much more serious situations. But when I found myself at home, not able to come to church, watching on live stream, listening on WITB, I would hear and see the people, hear my name mentioned, and hear the people praying for me. And that it's a very moving thing, to be honest. I'd never been in a prolonged situation where I felt I needed the prayers of others like that. I would receive cards, texts, calls, and even visits from folks who would tell me, we're thinking of you, we're praying for you. And this is both humbling and uplifting at the same time. When you're in a situation where you truly feel like you need the prayers of others, it's easy to start feeling down or feeling frustrated at times, but actually knowing that you've got so many praying for you and thinking of you, it helps more than you might think unless you've been there yourself. And again, I know the ones who have had situations, and even here recently, would probably attest to this also. And I've always felt that our congregation was very good in regard to praying for others. Our elders set a great example of this. I know in their meetings they pray for so many people on the prayer list and others they know of. And they pray for these on a daily basis. And that's a great example for us to follow. But the main point that I wanted to focus on tonight was I want to encourage everyone, including myself, to not only pray for those who are in need or have situations going on in their lives, but take that extra minute or two to send them a card, to give them a quick call, shoot them a text. If they're up for visits, maybe a short visit, to let them know that. It will help more than you possibly might imagine. It's a great source of encouragement. I received countless cards. I wish I had counted them, but they meant so much, and it really can be a great source of encouragement during a difficult situation. Now tonight, there may be someone here who feels like they need the prayers of the church. They've got something going on in their lives, and they'd like everyone to pray for them. Or maybe you've drifted away, and you want to be brought back closer to God and need the prayers. And there may even be someone here tonight that feels like it's time to put on Christ in baptism. And if so, we'd invite you to come, whatever the need may be, while we stand and sing.
Down at the cross where my Savior died, down where for cleansing from sin I cried, there to my heart was the blood applied. Glory to Jesus so sweetly abides within. There at the cross where he took me in. Glory to his name. Glory to his name. Glory to his name. There to my heart was the blood applied. Glory to his name. Oh, precious fountain that saves from sin. I am so glad I have entered in. There Jesus saves me and keeps me clean. Glory to his name. Glory to his name. Glory to his name. There to my heart was a blood applied. Glory to his name. Thank you. We're dismissed our classes.
All right, we are ready to get started. We're going through our study in Proverbs. We're going to finish up our lesson from last week. You remember last week we studied integrity and honesty, and then we got into a short group of miscellaneous proverbs. And these are, if you recall, when I put this together, what I did was a lot of cut and paste. I wrote out, or I copied, I guess, every verse in the book of Proverbs, and I decided to come up with 10 different subject areas. And it ended up being about 20 different subject areas. By the time I was done, I divided it by 13 to try to get them all in the same area. And the miscellaneous proverbs are the ones I couldn't figure out where they would go. So it went in the shortest chapter of the lesson, which is lesson 10. So that's the reason these are here. But we're going to finish up our miscellaneous proverbs, and then we're going to talk about the happy heart. There's a lot of proverbs about how to have a happy heart. Now, we started on 14 verse 4 last week, and that's as far as we'd gotten. We were having a lot of fun with that proverb. So I said last week that, Lord willing, if the Lord put us together again next week, we're going to cover this one again. And so let's read it. Where no oxen are, the trough is clean, but much increase comes by the strength of an ox. All right. A lot of different ways to go with this. You ever see a guy, you go to his house, and you're out in the back in the shop, and you notice he has his tools, and the tools are in the perfect place. They're hung in just the right way, no dings, no scratches. They look absolutely brand new. Now, what does that mean? One thing could be he's just ADHD and very detail-oriented, or he buys a tool every time he goes to Lowe's and never uses it. And maybe sometimes we're that way. That'll happen to me sometimes, but my toolbox is never straightened out. It's never straightened out at all. Okay? If you go in my office, I don't have as many books as I used to. At one time, I had 22,000 books, which is a lot of books. I'm kind of sad about how I came across it. I was really hungry for books when I first started this whole preaching thing. And one of the ways I got a lot of books is I'd find preachers who'd quit. And I'd go and say, hey, give me all your books. I'll give you $100. And so I got a lot of books that way. But one thing that's interesting, in every church library, or especially preacher's library, you have some books that are worn over the years. And you can see how the pages are dark and everything else. And then you have some books. I have a few books in my library. I was showing Tyler Temple earlier today. I got some books in that little area. They may be 20 years old, but they look absolutely brand new. And it's because the cover looked really pretty when I got the book, but I just never have used it very much. All right, so you're thinking to yourself, why in the world is this proverb here? What does the Lord care about a book? Or what's the Lord care about a tool? Well, remember last week we talked about how many times, especially in functions of society, and we will apply it to the church, there's messiness. And where we started this last week is we were talking about the church building. You go into our gym or the family activity center, depending on what you want to call the place. On the other end of the C of the building, the other end of the drive around, you go over there, you see a room that has got issues, right? You've got some globes that are knocked off with the lights way up there. You've got some kickballs that are stuck into the roof. You've got holes in the walls. You have got marks here on the walls and on the floor. 2 of the door handles have absolutely fallen off, okay? Now, a lot of people look at that and say, oh my goodness, we need to learn some respect of how to take care of a place. And that's very true. But another way of looking at it is notice how much that room is used. 3 times a week, we have close to 100 preschoolers running around there. And not only those preschoolers, but those teachers. You got to watch those teachers, right, y'all? Got to watch those teachers, okay? 5 days a week, you have somewhere in the range of 80, 4th grade all the way through 8th graders running around in there. And one interesting thing about the after school, let me tell you a different story. Here I am chasing rabbits. I was at camp about 3 years ago. And one thing I always enjoy doing about camp, I don't have a lot of responsibilities when I'm out there, West Kentucky Youth Camp, is I like to go and help some of the smaller kids put their beds together. And so, they'll come, their mother will be there, I'll get the sheets and hop on that top bunk, and I'll be putting the sheets in and everything. And I was helping a kid one time put his sheets in there, and I was talking to him because I'd never seen him before in my life. And I said, well, hey, glad you're here. It's the first year at camp. That's really good and everything. And I said, well, where do you go to church? And he said, I go to the Benton Church of Christ. And I thought, uh-oh. I said, you do? And he said, yes. And I was like, all right. And his mama said, yes, Travis Terrell's our preacher. Well, I thought, well, my goodness, I got replaced. I better hurry home, But what had happened was this kid was going to our after-school program, ended up getting to go to camp, but his view of church, all the church he got, was coming to our after-school program, and he would hear Travis teach those classes every day, and that was his connection to God. That was his connection to camp, which was there. So hopefully those seeds have been planted to go a little bit further. So there's two ways to look at damage to a church building. The first way is to say, listen, this is the Lord's place. It needs to be treated with respect. The money which is spent on this place is holy, and we've got to be very careful about what's being used here. And that is absolutely true. But the other aspect is this building is a tool, and it is a tool to get people closer to God. Now, you'll find some church buildings that are only used 4 hours a week, and they're used very, very little. And those buildings look absolutely pristine year after year after year. I appreciate being in a building that looks well worn. There are some things we need to work on and things we need to do, but I appreciate the fact of how we use this building to impact the community and to reach out. And I think that's a little bit of what he's saying here. That's the concept coming across there in verse 4. If there's no oxen, the trough is clean. If a farmer has a trough out there and he owns no oxen, that trough's going to last a long time. He doesn't have to go out and clean the field and clean all those areas. But when there's an oxen that's out there in the field, a lot can be done. And so there's some work that goes with the maintenance, but it is well worth it for the work that's done. All right, I've talked a lot. Anybody else want to comment? There's a joy that comes in teaching the auditorium class. A joy that comes with that. All right. 13, verse 13. Notice this one. Even in laughter, the heart may sorrow, and the end of myrrh may be grief. All right. The word myrrh there is the perfume or the incense that would be let off at a time of celebration. It'd be something which people would let off when people are happy. And what the Proverbs writer here is saying is there are times in life where you'll be happy, and there's still sadness somewhere in there. And then there's some times when there's great sadness when you can find a silver lining that's somewhere in that cloud. And so it's interesting seeing how those work together. And we always need to remember that very rarely are we 100% happy, and very rarely are we 100% sad. Usually there is a mixture somewhere through there. All right? 18 seems a little complicated. Casting lots causes contention to cease, and it keeps the mighty apart. Remember back in the Bible days, they used to cast a lot. And what that would mean was a dice of some sort. And they would cast it, you see in the book of Leviticus, the high priest kept it in the pouch in his vest, and he would cast it, and the Lord would determine which way it went. And that was the way in which the Lord would determine something. Where we are aware of that is with Achan and his sin and being identified after the defeat of Ai in the early parts of the book of Judges, around Judges chapter 5. And we're also aware of it in Acts chapter 1 when we choose our apostle, right? And so today we don't really use that to choose things. The Lord doesn't speak to us through dice. But I think what we see here is the need to settle disagreements. When you go ahead and settle a fight and settle an argument instead of letting it simmer, oftentimes things are better off. And so what he's saying here is don't allow an argument or a fight between two people to continue to simmer. When you have, as they say in church, aught with a brother, when you got an issue with somebody, be sure to get those things taken care of. Chapter 20, verse 5. Now, some of the ladies may disagree with this, and they may say their husbands are shallow. But what he says here is counsel in the heart of a man is like deep water, but a man of understanding will draw it out. All right, deep water is an area where it's hard to get a hold of something. You throw something out in the middle of Kentucky Lake, guys, if you're out there fishing and your phone falls out, you've got problems, right? Because sometimes it'll be over 100 feet down there. But that's an issue where he's saying here in the Proverbs, it's hard to get to some matters. But a person of understanding knows how to work with people in order to pull something out. And that's one of the tasks that we have to learn, is learn how to, I'm not thinking of the word manipulate, but I'm thinking about the word how to deal with people to figure out what the problem is. Mothers and sometimes fathers, have you ever been in a situation where you ask your child what's going on and they say, well, nothing? You know, nothing is different sometimes than nothing, right? And sometimes you realize by the way and the intonation or by the way it's said that really nothing is something. And if you know your child well enough, you can figure those sort of things out. And that's a goal each one of us should have in those things. All right, verse 6. This goes back to what we talked about Sunday night, looking at Jeremiah chapter 5 and Genesis 18. It's the Lord's looking for a righteous man somewhere. Most men will proclaim each his own goodness, but really, who can find a faithful man? Most people, if you ask them if they're good, they'll say, of course I am, right? But it's very rare that you find a person that is wholly, completely focused on God, he says. Who can say, I've made my heart clean and I am pure from sin? Who can say they don't struggle at all with those sins? All right. We'll go ahead and look at the next one. Depends on your translation. The glory of a young man is in his strength, and the splendor of an old man is in his gray hair. Some other translations say, but the really smart people don't have a lot of hair at the end of this verse. All right. Okay, we'll stick with that. Verse 29. Glory of young man is their strength. The splendor of an old man is his gray head. All right. What's that proverb mean? Okay, there's wisdom. You ever play with teenage guys and you need to move something? You know how you get it moved? You point at it and say, I bet you can't pick that up. And what's going to happen? Superhuman strength. If you get them off their phone for 5 minutes, they are super strong, right? And it's amazing what a young guy can pick up and what a young man can actually do. Now, when you get old, like 30, or maybe a little bit more, you can't quite pick up as much as you used to be able to. But when you're old, what do you learn to do? You learn to look at the young guy and say what? Bet you can't pick that up, right? All right. What'd you say? There's wisdom. You learn how to get things moved without hurting your own back, hopefully. And so you got a little bit of guile, I think some people will say, as they look at some of the proverbs of other people who have written about this. And so that's what he's talking about there. There's a lot of strength in youth. There's a lot of wisdom in old age. And wherever you are in life, you need to learn how to use what you have to your advantage. To do righteous and justice is more acceptable to the Lord than sacrifice. You recognize that verse, right? Because you think over in 1 Samuel chapter 18, Samuel was talking to Saul, and Saul says, look, we stole all these things from the Amorites, or the Amalekites, excuse me, I got my A's mixed up. The Amalekites, we saved King Agag, we saved these sheep because we're about to sacrifice them. We're going to have us a super duper worship service. And Samuel says to obey is better than sacrifice. All right? That concept is repeated one more time in the Old Testament, and it's also repeated in the New Testament. So if it's 5 times in the Bible, what in the world does that mean? Obedience is better than sacrifice, or righteousness and justice is more acceptable than sacrifice. What does that mean?
I think it means that we see a lot of people that do things they think for the Lord, but it's not according to his instructions.
Okay. A lot of people do a lot of things for the Lord, but it's not according to his instruction. Okay.
It's their own righteousness.
Okay. Yeah. Paraphrasing Paul, 1 Corinthians 13:1, right? Speak with tongues of men of angels, but if I do it without love, it's what? It's an obnoxious gong, right? Though I give my body to be burned, like in verse 3, though I give everything I own to the poor without love, it's nothing. Now going back to verse 2, I may be the smartest man in the Bible. Though I have all faith and though I have all knowledge, I'm the smartest critter out there when it comes to Scripture, Paul would say. If I don't have love, if I don't have wisdom in using that knowledge, it profits me nothing. All right, that's a little bit of a parallel concept there. Yes, sir.
Well, back then, too, a lot of the Jews were going through the motions.
Right.
Doing their daily sacrifices as a checklist, and righteousness really meant nothing to them. So that's
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's what you get. Saul said, listen, we're going to sacrifice all these sheep. This is going to be the biggest sacrifice maybe to date in the country. And Samuel says, God doesn't care about sacrifice. God wants you to obey. Now today, some people have these beautiful worship services, eloquent preachers. You ought to buy tickets to some of these concerts that people put on Sunday morning and call worship, because it's better than any other concert you could go on a Friday or Saturday night. And though they have all these things, what's God really want? The heart. Simple, plain obedience and sincerity. And that's what this is talking about. Another parallel passage of this, Matthew 23, verse 23. You tithe, Jesus is saying to the Pharisees and to the scribes, you tithe all of your mints and all of your salt and all of your cumin, all the different things you put on your food. And he says, these things you should do, that's okay. But you now have neglected mercy and justice and love. And he said you should have done the former and the latter. So obedience and sacrifice are both very important. And so that is a passage which rings through. Yes, sir?
Wouldn't that also be like when Paul said, in reference to this, shall we continue in sin that
Grace may abound. Yes.
Isn't that the same idea?
Right, right. Yeah, as Paul's going through in that passage, he's talking about the wonderful grace of God and how God forgives sins. And he says, but wait, don't sin so that God will give more grace, so show God loves you more. Because those, he says there in chapter 5, those who are Christ have put to death this worldliness. You don't sin because of grace. You stop sin because of grace. And that's important to do. All right, let's see. You have the repeat, which we looked at before, verse 29. To do justice, we looked at that one before. 22:28, you may remember that one. Don't move the ancient landmark which your fathers have set. And we talked about how a lot of times that's taken out of context. We oftentimes will use that verse talking about denominationalism and how you need to be sure to go back to the old ways. And while the concept's right, the context isn't quite right. What it's saying here is don't cheat your neighbor. And you can imagine what's going on here. You got a farmer who waits till his neighbor goes to bed. He runs out and gets the mark that separates their field, and he moves it over 10 feet, so he's going to be able to have better crops. And then he goes to bed, and what's the neighbor do? He comes up, moves it back 12 feet, right? And what the writer here is saying is treat your neighbor fair. Don't try to defraud your neighbor. All right, 24:10. If you faint in a day of adversity, your strength is small. In other words, who you really are, where your faith really is not seen necessarily when things are easy. Who you really are is seen when things are really, really bad. Okay? And I think your faith, we could go either way. Your faith is shown when everything is going your way or when nothing's going your way. Usually when you're in the middle, you show your faith a little bit, but in the midst of just amazing sickness, in the midst of amazing grief, in the midst of amazing reversal of fortunes, you really see who a person is. And I think that's what he's talking about there. All right. 24:27. Now tell me what this means, okay? Prepare your outside work. Make it fit for yourself in the field, and afterward, build your house. What's he saying there?
Take care of important stuff first.
Yeah, take care of important stuff first. All right. My boys have been coming home from school all this week, right? And they are excited because basketball season is coming to the best time of the year, right? My oldest bought a shirt, which he wore, I think, to school today. South Dakota State. He bought it last year because they went to the tournament. And they won their tournament again. They're going to be a 15 seed, which probably means they're going to end up playing Kentucky. But he really has fun with South Dakota State because they got in. All right? But my issue with him is he's coming home and watching basketball. And then at 10, when I say it's time to go to bed, he says, "But Dad, I haven't done my homework." All right? And so he did his homework. And 11:30 he was walking through it. He said, "Well, Dad, I need to do laundry. Don't have anything clean for tomorrow." And I was like, man, all right. You know, what in the world? All right. Now, he's bad because we never do that, do we? Do you ever put off stuff you need to do? Okay, no. All right. Confession is good for the soul. That's not in Proverbs, so we'll keep going. All right. Some more miscellaneous Proverbs. All right, this one's for Saturday, okay? Like the cold of snow in time of harvest is a faithful messenger to those who send him, for he refreshes the soul of his masters. All right. Now, this is different than what we would think of. Remember how they used to harvest fields back in that day? They didn't hop in their combine and just drive around and do stuff. I remember one time, many years ago, doing a gospel meeting in Greenwood, Mississippi, which is in the Delta. And one of the guys said, "Let me take you to the cotton field and show you how it works." And I thought, oh, you shouldn't fall for this one. But I did. I went out there. He had a combine. The thing was over $1 million, 80 feet wide. And he buys a new one every 3 years. So it's pretty big time stuff. But he got inside the cab. The thing is air conditioned, beautiful. And what you do is when you turn it on, you hit the satellite link. And it's already programmed in there what the dimensions of your field are. And it will run it, the combine and whatever you use to plant with it, in the exact amount, in the exact speed to be most efficient. And it will turn around trees or turn around whatever is there in a way that uses the smallest amount of fuel in the most efficient way. And so what he does is he sits inside his thing and he watches YouTube videos and Netflix while the thing drives around. And so it's kind of an interesting little deal that he has. Now, that's not what they did back here in the 1st century or in the 5th century BC, was it? How would they harvest the field back then? Yeah, you get down there with your scythe and you begin to have to cut it, and then you have to bind it, and then you'd have to take it in and you'd have to thresh it. And so you can imagine these guys working from sun up to sundown in the fields, trying to get everything done, and you work and work and work, and it finally snows, and you're like, oh no, I can't go to work anymore. In a sense, you always want to work so you can make a little bit more, but in the sense in which he's speaking is saying, hey, listen, this is a time when you finally get to take a break. The season is finally over. You're finally done. It's like people in church, when they finally hear me start the invitation, they're like, oh. One good thing about PowerPoint, if you remember the generation past, and younger folks, we really did have time before PowerPoint. One thing I always liked is if you ever used words that were similar to the invitation, you would hear in unison. Everybody would pull out their songbooks. I always liked that. All right. Well, there's that refreshing there. What's a refreshing? Somebody who comes and says a kind word, a good word to you, which is there. All right. Verse 16. All right. Getting a little gross here. If you found honey, eat only as much as you need, lest you get full of it and you end up vomiting it. Okay? Pretty gross right there, right? Yuck. All right, what's he saying? Moderation is a wonderful thing, right? Do we ever get to the point where we start chasing things more than we should? Absolutely. Absolutely. Many years ago, I loved the yogurt-covered raisins. And I remember I ate a whole bag, and since then, every time I see them, I'm just like, ugh, I don't want them. Because I ate too many that first time. And so all these years I've had to do without. And you can see I'm withering away because of it. All right, so you look there in verse 16, it tells you moderation is very important. Okay, 19, confidence in an unfaithful man in a time of trouble is like a bad tooth or a foot out of joint. We don't have those issues as much as they did back then, but maybe you remember sometime you've had a toothache and you needed a root canal, or maybe you just had a root canal. And so whenever you eat, you have to use only one side of your mouth, right? And that side gets real sore, it doesn't feel very good, and those sort of things. That's what he's talking about. It's bad to put your trust in somebody who you know is not going to come through. You need to be very careful before you do that. It's rough when you got a sore knee or a sore ankle and somebody parks way out there and you have to make it all the way in. In the same way, don't have confidence in a man you can't trust. All right, verse 20, like one who takes away your garment in the cold weather, and like vinegar on soda, is somebody who sings songs to a heavy heart. Have you ever seen somebody like that? They're just way too happy. You're like, man, don't be so happy. Yes, ma'am. Huh? I think it was primarily Pepsi. Coke didn't come to the 1800s. Huh? I'm not really sure what it is. They did have different things like a soda. This isn't like soda pop. This is more like your powdered stuff. Huh? I don't know what the background of it is. I should have figured that out before we started. I'm joking about the Pepsi, by the way. I just thought that would be fun to say. Oh, we're going back to Sunday. Oh, no. Oh, don't start that conversation again. We got in a conversation in here in the auditorium class about the origin of Satan Sunday. Oh, yeah, that was fun. All right. Yes?
I think it is like baking soda. I think that's the same concept then. Vinegar on soda is very
Explosive.
much of a reaction.
Very much explosive, yes.
That would make sense.
Yes, right. Yes. If you're a teenager, don't do it. But you can get a 2-liter bottle and fill it with vinegar. And then what else do you put in it? Does anybody want to fess up that they know? Okay. Sometimes tin foil, sometimes soda, sometimes other chemicals. And you can make a big boom. And we get in trouble doing that. All right, 26 verse 2. Like a flitting sparrow and like a flying swallow, so a curse without cause shall not alight. Okay? Just like these birds are always moving and they don't sit still long enough for you to catch with a net back in these days, he says in the same way, excuse me, a curse that somebody shouldn't have given you is going to cause a problem. It's not going to stay still. 27, verse 27, so often applies to me. You dig a pit, what's going to happen? You fall into it. He who rolls a stone is going to have what happen? Roll right back on him. All right. Maybe you remember a generation ago, a super violent cartoon. If anyone ever saw it, they must have just done everything they saw, right? Remember the Roadrunner and Coyote? And you notice it came from one of the golden years where they didn't have to put on every single thing, don't do this at home. Back then, people maybe have known not to do it at home. But what would happen? What was the whole premise that happened 1 million zillion times? What would Coyote do? Huh? Every time he'd go to the Acme company and have something dropped off, he would come up with an elaborate plan to blow up the Roadrunner. And the Roadrunner would go by and go beep, beep, and then take off, and then whatever would happen, and it would fall right on the Coyote. It was the Acme products. Must have been what it was. But it was, I don't know why it was so funny, but it was. And it was the same gag maybe 1 million times over and over and over. Well, what's this parable teaching us? Be careful when you try to get revenge on somebody, because when you try to get revenge, what ends up happening? hurts you more than it hurts them, right? When you're filled with anger and you're angry at somebody, does that really affect them? It ends up affecting you a lot more than it affects them. And so that's something important for us to know. All right, let's keep going. A satisfied soul loathes the honeycomb, but the hungry soul, every bitter thing is sweet. All right, you've been in church for 2 hours. You go to Majestic, see the buffet, even the asparagus is good, right? Okay, and I say that because I don't like asparagus. If you like asparagus, I apologize. All right, but when you're full, you don't even want ice cream. All right, and that kind of teaches us about the way that life works. Sometimes you need to learn to have certain hungers so that you'll appreciate things. Well, that's what I've heard. I've not reached the point of saturation on ice cream, but I've heard it can happen. Okay, as water in the face, or as in water, face reflects face, so a man's heart reveals a man. The way in which he treats other people shows his character. The refining pot for silver and a furnace for gold. A man is valued by what other people will say about him. Okay? Don't always listen to what the guy says about himself, right? Listen to what other people say about him. All right, 29:19. Okay, a servant will not be corrected by mere words, for though he understands, he will not respond. Usually in the Proverbs, when you're talking about a servant, it talks about somebody who's made so many bad decisions they become a slave. And he says some people, especially in parts of life where they're going punishment, they're just not going to learn. They're not going to respond to what they need. All right? He who pampers his servant from childhood will have him as a son in the end. Okay? If you take care of somebody all their life, they'll turn into a son for you. You'll grow in your relationship towards them. And that'll be something pretty important. All right, let's look at these ideas about a merry heart. Why is it good to have a merry heart? A merry heart makes a cheerful countenance, but by sorrow of the heart, the spirit is broken. All the days of the afflicted are evil, but he who is of a merry heart has a continual feast. All right, once again, you see the parallel poetry going on here. Explain to me verse 15. The days of the afflicted are evil, but even if your evil is going on, when you have a merry heart, he says you have a continued feast. What does that mean? Doesn't even say soda in it, does it? Okay? There are some people who, no matter how bad the situation is in their life, they can find something decent in it. They can find something glorious in it. They can find a good reflection which is there. And so that merry heart, he says, even in the days of evil, can have a continual feast and enjoy the good times in memory. Okay? A merry heart does good like medicine, but a broken spirit dries the bones. Okay? Sometimes the best medicine you can have is laughter, good memories, joy, and being around happy people. But sometimes even when life is good and you get put next to somebody sour, it doesn't take long until you feel bad about the world too, right? Man, some people are just like, man. I remember riding around with a person one time when I was doing intern work in Middle Tennessee, and it was out in the country. And I remember we drove by out there. Land was cheaper, and so people would have like 5-10 acres, and with beautiful yards. And the person would always look at that yard and say, man, I bet they spend forever mowing that, And I remember one time watching a game show with them. I think it was Wheel of Fortune, something like that. And they had won something, like $10,000 or something. And they said, well, imagine how much they're going to have to pay in taxes. All right? You ever meet somebody like that? And don't point. Don't point to anybody. But every once in a while you find somebody who they find something wrong with everything in the world. Try to be the person who finds something good in everything in the world. Okay, the spirit of a man will sustain him in sickness, but who can bear a broken spirit? A broken heart will really shoot you down. All right, how do you get a happy heart? Deceit in the heart Deceit is in the heart of those who devise evil, but the counselors of peace have joy by fulfilling your desire. Okay? Hope deferred makes the heart sick, but when desire comes, it is the tree of life, right? Okay? Say we're still following our resolutions, and you know that Saturday is going to be a cheat day, and you're going to get to eat our ice cream. All right? You think about the ice cream, you think about the ice cream, and you think about the ice cream. You finally go up there and get your ice cream. It's going to taste better than it's ever tasted because you've been waiting so long for it. You're waiting on your kids to come home from college, and you're waiting, and at least when they come home for the first 3 days, you love them, right? After that, you're ready to send them back. That's those things that it's talking about. When you wait and that desire comes, it's a tree of life. The light of the eyes rejoices in the heart, and a good report makes the bones healthy. It is a joy for the just to do justice, but destruction will come on the workers of iniquity. When you live the way you should, when you treat others the way they should be treated, there's a lot of joy that comes in life. But when you try to do them wrong and try to hurt them, it doesn't work. Okay? Speaking correctly. My son, if your heart is wise, my heart will rejoice. Indeed, I myself, yes, in my own inmost being, will rejoice when your lips speak the right things. He's seen these passages, a father talking about how much he enjoys it when his kids do well, right? Okay. All right. Well, we'll finish there, and we'll start up with that again next week, Lord willing. Thanks for being in here.